Hello, members. It's me, the Ebony Otaku, your well rounded communication nerd. And today we're going to talk about the science of communication. What brought this topic up and why I'm setting aside looking into authentic self right now is there's been a couple of things that I have observed in my own nerdy community and in the greater nerdy community that I think would be great to talk about specifically when we're talking about showing up as our authentic self. And I talk about, hey, how do you show what the best version of yourself is? A lot of that is rooted in understanding how human communication works. Just so those joining understand, I do have a degree in the science of communication. I am using images that come from educational sources, which is why this material is behind the paywall. I will not be putting that out into the public internet. While talking about things in general are okay, when you're using other images and stuff, I want to make sure that I am respecting the rights of those who own these images. So uh, let's get into it. So you may or may not have noticed that a lot of times in stereotypical nerd communities, and I'm talking about when we consider people who are introverted, the way that introversion is classed now. You know, people who tend to have persons, not groups, tend to rather be home than out. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is. Or people in their greater social circles, like schools, church, activities, that type of thing. Maybe their hobbies and interests were more niche as compared to the group. Like going to a church where everybody's into a particular football team, but you happen to be the kid that likes theater and art. You know, those types of things. And what tends to happen is that drives us unintentionally into a mindset of not being able to adequately communicate with people who don't think and feel the way we do. And that has benefits and it has negatives as well. Some of the benefits of that are, well, maybe I'll just meet more people who are like me. But the negative of that is creating an echo chamber of thoughts and input that are only like one's own. We do not grow, we do not expand, we do not become well-rounded people if we only have experiences and input that align with ourselves to understand the world, to grow in relationships, to grow with people around us. We have to be interested in others. It can also produce a lot of misunderstanding when a person is only used to communicating with people that are like them, think like them, show up in the world like them, when someone else shows up with messaging or a way of being that is foreign to what one is comfortable with, then it can feel upsetting. And that's where a lot of offense can happen. That's where hurt feelings happen. That's where arguments happen. What's the phrase? Well, that's how the fight started. And what we're going to talk about in this time is how to not start the fight. The reason it came up so prevalent in my mind, why I'm abandoning my textbooks for a little bit, is when my husband and I went to NashCon. So as you know, she's recovering from a surgery, and so my husband had to do a lot of the driving and all that kind of stuff. I would go down, participate in the game, and then go back upstairs and sleep for 14 hours. It was great, and honestly, everyone there was very nice and kind to me. Um, NashCon is more of a historical gaming convention, so it tends to attract an older retired military crowd, mostly male, not all, but mostly. But I could count the number of women who were there, but everyone was absolutely lovely. But a couple of the game tables we sat down at, when people realized my husband and I were a married couple, it's funny because I know that sometimes, depending on how I've styled myself, she can look anywhere from 27 to 58. You know, if I do the full like Afrikaans look and I have the hair up in a turban and a tight good good form dress and that kind of thing, she looks her age. But when I go like, high school look, then I end up looking like I'm in my 20s because I have a very young looking face. It's just, hey, genetics can't help that. My mother let me inherit her good skin. But when they look at us, they don't realize that my husband and I are only 7 years apart. And we met when I was 39. So my husband and I are 7 years, 7.5 years apart. But looking at us, if you just look at the surface, because his hair went white when he was young. So they think that he's like way older than me, like he's my sugar daddy or something. Like, no, we're both middle-aged white collar nerds. That's nobody's business. But people look at the optics of us and then start making jokes. So we sat down at one game, and I love the game, honestly. I'm trying to figure out, it's an older game, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get to play it, but I'm about to learn how to cut acrylic, is what it's going to turn out. But when we sat down at that game, and all the men around the table, it was all men, I was the only female, realized that we were a couple. It was Axis versus Allies. It was like a German flight simulation game where the Allies had to defend against the Axis powers. The Axis were trying to, take out a city, and the Allies were trying to defend. My husband and I were on the same side, and that's just because of when we joined. Like, oh, that's when the joke started. Well, we got to put them on the same side. Or there'll be a fight all the way home. And I looked at them and I said, "What are you talking about? Ha ha! We understand how it is." Ha 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 ha. I was like, "My husband and I have never had a fight," and they looked at me like I had three heads. And they're like, "Yeah, right." I said, "No, seriously, we don't fight. There's nothing to fight about." And then the game commenced. That happened a second time at another game we were playing, where we were actually in a little bit of a tournament. And so we weren't on the same side. It was an individual tournament. And I actually ended up placing fourth, which I was really proud because I was new to the game. But everyone in the room was like, "Oh, well, we got to make sure that these two don't play each other. Otherwise, we're going to have arguments and everything else." And there was one other lady that played, and she kept going on about how her and her husband, they had to drive X amount of hours and they fought the whole way. And she's like, and she looks at me, "You know how that is." No, I don't. I don't. My husband and I don't fight. We don't have arguments. Doesn't mean we don't have disagreements, but we don't fight. We communicate well with each other intentionally. But one cannot intentionally communicate well and get to a place of not having intense fellowship without wanting to. One cannot be curious about other people without being intentional about it. We can't get outside of ourselves and step into the world as the best version of ourselves if we are not, one, intentionally curious, but two, practice understanding what good communication looks like. How does communication happen? What are the choices I can make in communication? And then on top of that, once I understand that, how do other people communicate so that I can have the best interaction with them possible? At 40 something years old, that's something I've learned. Now, let's be very clear, she didn't come out of a box like this. When I was younger, I was very much a, what do they call it? I was coming for you. when I sensed disrespect. This is a horrible story, but I said this, and y'all can think about me what you want. But I was 17 when I said this in high school. I had been asked to. I was doing some theater projects, and there was a team of young people. Young people. I was one of them who needed someone in addition to their team. We were doing like a big expo at our high school. It was senior year. I was 17 in senior year. Yeah, I know. I started school honestly. Not my fault. I didn't get bumped ahead. My parents stuck me in school when I was very young. They didn't let anybody hold me back. Like, yeah. So that's one really good thing my parents did for me. And that probably enhanced my communication skills because when you're 3 years old and you're hanging out with people who are all 2 years older than you're going to start talking the way they do. So that helped actually advance my skills unknowingly. But anywho, back to it. So when I was in high school, my senior year, we were doing this big expo, and I was a theater kid my last couple of years of high school. Like I really got into it, got into being on the forensics team, the debate team, did a lot of performing. I thought I was going to go to college for that. I did go initially for theater and English. I was getting invited to conservatories. Like it was a good time. It really was. And I got a little full of myself. Not gonna lie. I like that last year of high school. She thought she was the stuff and could not be told no about anything. And uh, my theater teacher, one of the we had he separated us out into groups to do basically small vignettes of plays, and I actually still have the book for that play somewhere. Oh, it's right here, my prop book. It was this one right here, Pyramus and Thisbe. This is from when I was 17. It's got everything in here, so the notes, and I even drew a little like end scene of Pyramus and Thisbe about who the players are, all my notes, the script, everything is in here. And I directed um, some of my peers and putting on a portion of Pyramus and Thisbe as part of this theater expo. Like I even have like my stage directions in here. Like I've held on to this for 20 something years because I don't know, it's just precious to me. Like look, I really thought I was going to be the next big thing. Look at all these notes. It's insane. It's falling apart. Don't care. Never getting rid of it. Put this back here. But I was doing Pyramus and Thisbe, and my our little vignette set of play. Oh, the book's falling apart and there's stuff all over my desk now. We're gonna have to get out the vacuum. Our little set of plays was going really good. Well, this other group, they had someone drop out. I don't even remember the reason why, but my theater teacher said, "Oh, if anybody can handle doing two, it would be her. So will you join this other group?" And this is what happens when you don't know how to communicate. I'm using an example from my teen years because you want to talk about a group of society that can't communicate. It's teenagers. I don't care how smart you think your kid is. They're, the brain is not done yet. And as smart as I made good grades. I was very good, in my theatrics and stuff. Um, but I was upset that I got put with a lesser group. And when I went to practice with them and start learning lines, I learned my lines in like a day. I can memorize very easily. Theater training. Um, I was just disappointed. They were beneath me. And then one day, the girl who was leading that group and me were in such disagreement about how things were going that in class, while we were supposed to be working on these projects, we started name calling back and forth. I forget what she said to me, but I looked at her and I called her a cesspool of ignorance. And she went, "Yeah, I know, terrible." Um, and then she said something else to me, and I took it a step further. Y'all ready for this? You ain't ready. Trigger warning. I was 17, y'all. I looked at her and I said, I've told this story before, so I mean, it's not like I haven't told it. I looked at her and I said, "You're the reason God allows abortion." I was 17. That was rough. That was rough. I should not have said that. I said it because I was egotistical. I said it because I let my feelings override good judgment. I said it because I was living in ego and not reason. I said it because I did not care about the challenges of that group or what they were trying to achieve. I only cared about me. And in my little version of a kingdom, I was at the top. And I thought they were beneath me. I told you I didn't come out of a box this way. But I've learned. I actually, before the end of that year, did go and apologize to her. But I still never should have said it. I bet she tells that story completely differently than I do because I would wager that affected her. It did. There's no way it didn't for somebody to say something like that to me. I used to be very hot headed, very one track minded, that if something didn't agree with the way I saw the world, then I just wasn't going to receive it, and that you must be wrong because you are not me and me is correct. And that's where disagreement and fights start in communication. I am not concerned with thee, I am only concerned with me. Fast forward 20 something years with my husband, we communicate. I've been married one time before. Um, but we were very young. We got married right out of high school. Didn't know how to communicate. I didn't understand his childhood. He didn't understand mine. We didn't know how the ways we grew up affected the adults that we became. And obviously, it didn't work. You'll never hear me say a bad word about that young man. Well, we're the same age. He's only a couple months older than me. You'll never hear me say a bad word about him because we were young and dumb, both of us. It was not going to work. But my husband now, meeting me 20 years after that portion of my life, as someone who has intentionally grown, matured, learned from her mistakes, and takes an interest in understanding people and what matters to people that aren't me, and caring about the great wide world, he got a version of me that didn't exist when I was 17 and 18. I started with that just to let you know there is light at the end of the tunnel. Nobody comes out of a box a good communicator. Nobody starts this journey being able to be friendly and accepting of all. It takes practice. It's not one of those things. It's like listening. Everybody says, "I'm a good listener." Are you? not a natural skill. Baby's first words are mine and no, and they should be because that's natural preservation. We're created that way so that we, are taken care of by the adults around us. That is a natural mechanism. So it's not a bad thing. But juxtapose that against getting older. When my husband and I were dating, so I was 39 at the time when we were dating, and I finally just started coming to visit him in his city. He spent 6 months coming to Nashville before I visited him in his town. I know he had a good one, but I finally started visiting because I knew I was going to be with him. I knew that we were going to be together. So I was starting to get introduced to his friends, his friend group, people he knew, and we were on the way to a bonfire. It was a fall night, and no, it was winter. It was a winter night. Winter had just begun, and we were joking on the way there. And you can probably tell that I got a little bit of a crass sense of humor. A lot of people do, but I have a very good command of language, especially English. And sometimes I can say things, even with the level of maturity and education I have now, that I shouldn't have said that. But at least now I recognize it. And we were on our way, and he and I were just joking back and forth. I can't even remember what I said, but I did say something that hurt his feelings. But I did not let it linger. I was making a joke in my head. It was funny. Wasn't trying to be mean at all. But what's funny to one person may be wounding to another. And if both of you aren't laughing, it's not a joke. Like these pranksters out here, if both of you aren't laughing, it's not a prank. It's violence. It's assault if you're not both laughing. If you're not both laughing, it wasn't a funny comment. It was hurtful. But here's what changed. I've intentionally learned how to be a good communicator. I literally have invested in the education of understanding people. My profession is adult education in communication. That is what I do for a living. And all of that experience prepared me for this moment because I remember the moments when I said things that were hurtful and stood behind them because I was right and I was this. But this is somebody I really cared about and wanted to spend my life with. When we pulled into the drive before getting out of the car, I looked at him and I said, "Babe, babe, I think I said something that may have hurt you. Please let me know what it was and why it hurt you so that I don't say it again. I'm so sorry." And he looked at me and he started crying. I was like, "Oh God, this is it. We're about to break up." No. He was crying because he had not experienced it. I'm not going to get into his story, but because his story is his own to tell, and if he doesn't choose to tell, I'm not telling his business. But he did not come from the experience of having a partner who cared about his feelings. I have learned to care about people's feelings. I have learned to care about how I communicate and how my words and actions affect people. If you want to grow in this world and have more people in your world to experience the best that this world has to offer, we have to learn to communicate. And that night, my husband was already in love with me, but he told me after that night he knew he could trust me. Because rather than let something linger or try to defend why I thought my actions and words were correct, I apologized immediately. I recognized what I did and I took ownership. But that takes time, education, and intentional investment in understanding. Part of the reason I'm so good at what I do is because I invest work in becoming a better communicator. I'm not done. I'm still learning. I'm working on a master's degree in organizational leadership because there's still more to learn. There's still more for me to know. There's still more for me to achieve. I'm good. I can be better. So here's how I'm going to help you. What are some of the things that I've learned through my journey, not just my educational journey, but my career journey, on how we show up as better communicators? Well, there's this first image. What do you see here? What do you see? There are so many versions of this image that exist. There's thousands of them. But again, that's why we're behind the paywall for this. But what you see here is what happens when you communicate. So over here on the right hand side, I'm sorry, the left hand side, you see a guy with a megaphone. What is he doing? He is sending a message. So we have a messenger, we have a message that is being sent, we have the message itself, and then what's over here? person hearing, the person receiving the message. So communication works this way. There is a messenger who has a message to send. There is the method by which they send the message, which will affect how the message is sent and then how it's received. The receiver who is getting the message may or may not receive it with the intention of the sender. Why is that? Well, look at all the methods that are outlined here. There is written messaging, which do people write anymore? I do. I take physical notes sometimes. And then I look at my handwriting and go back to typing or using Gemini notes. They can be told through another person, a little game of telephone. Hey, can you tell so and so that I need them to blah, 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 since you're going by their desk? Maybe the message made it, maybe it didn't. Messaging can come through email, it can come through text messaging, social media, the most dangerous of all. There are so many ways messages can be sent, and each one of those ways of sending a message has its positives and its drawbacks. When something is written down, people are going to read it in their own tone. So the way you meant for it to be heard may not show up that way. I mean, what does all caps mean? It means yelling, right? So you might be all capsing to emphasize excitement. The person receiving it might see yelling and feel that. And then there's noise in the middle. What is noise? Noise is all the things that get in the way of the message being received in its intended fashion. So this sender has a message. They're trying to get it to the receiver. But what is noise? Noise literally can be if my son is home playing Fortnite and he's noisy. But noise can also be my phone going off or my husband calling me. If my dog was awake, thank God I played a thorough game of tug of war with him before sitting down to do this. Now he's tired, but if he was back there barking and carrying on, that would be noise. Noise might be things going on in my life that I'm thinking about other than the moment I'm in. It can be my state of mind. It can be where my feelings are at the moment. So when I'm receiving that message, regardless of what the sender intended or meant, I am filtering that message, one, through the medium in which it's sent, but then I'm also filtering that message through what's going on with me and my environment at the time. And that's what we tend to forget. Well, that's not what I said. Doesn't matter what you said. What matters is what they heard and how they internalized it. Because the truth is, people will never remember a word you say, but you know what they will remember? How you made them feel. That's what they'll remember. How did you make them feel with that message? So then we have to go back and consider, how am I sending this message? How do I want the message to be received? There's nothing you can do about noise. There's nothing you can do about another person's feelings or state of mind. But what we can do is take a second look at that email. We can think about our words and our tone before we say things. We can consider if it's the right moment to send a particular message. And then on the receiving end, when receiving it, remembering that the sender, we cannot assume bad intent. I am not going to assume that the person who sent that message in whatever way, whether it was a phone call, a text, an email, social media, had bad intentions. I'm not going to assume that. Are there people with bad intentions? There are. And that's why we click delete. That's why the hide and block button are. You will never see me engaging in drama on my channel. Hide, block, delete from channel. That's it. Done and dusted. Never happened. Don't care. Not engaging. But both parties have to consider that in between their messaging, sending and receiving, there's the medium of the message, and then there's the noise. And then there's the state of mind and being for everyone involved. If you want to get better at communicating and showing up in the world, you first have to recognize that every message, no matter how small it is, including me talking to you through this computer right now, there's going to be noise in between. If you are listening to this and not as background noise and not engaging with me and watching, it's going to come across differently than if you sat down and engaged and saw the visuals. If you are looking at the visual without explanation, that's going to change the message as well. If you just recently had a disagreement with somebody and your feelings are still heightened about that, that is also going to change how you receive the message. So those are the things we consider. And as we practice that intentionally, we get better at it over time. It has taken me a good 15, 20 years to get to the level of communicator I am. And you can probably tell, but I'm someone who does make acquaintances and friendships pretty easily. I've always been a gregarious personality. That is just naturally born into me. But I had to learn how to hone that gregariousness for good. Because I know people who are outgoing and great speakers and fun to be around, um, who are basically cult leaders. You can use your powers for good or ill, make your choice. But now that we know the science of how messages are sent and received, how do you dig a little deeper to become better with different types of personalities out there? Well, you may or may not have heard of this, but this has been around for a few decades now, and that is the DISC profile: dominant communicators, influence, conscientious communicators, and steady communicators. This is how you show up in your communication style. Now, let me be very clear: the DISC profile is not a personality assessment. There are other types of tests for that. Some more scientifically apt than others, but remember that this is all about how you show up when communicating with others. So there are lots of places where you can take free disc tests. Just type it into the Google. That's what I did to get this image. I just typed it into the Googler. But you can type in, hey, free disc profile. See, take it, be honest with the digital paper, and see how you show up. Because what the disc profiles do is show you that right now, how do you show up when you're engaging, regardless of how you're doing it. So the medium doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's email, texting, phone, social media. This is how you tend to show up, whether it's a social setting or just one on one with a person. How do you show up? And because it's a style, it can change over time. I've done the disc profile at least 12 times in my career, from a company I worked at when I was in my 20s to now. And when I was younger, you want to guess which one I was based on that first story I told you? I know what you might be thinking at first, and you will be right eventually. D, dominant. Dominant communicators are direct, results oriented. They tend to be very firm, strong willed, and forceful. What does that mean? What does that look like? These are people who are the get it done and not really concerned about who they have to push out of the way to get it done. So when they get a vision in their head of this is the grand design and we must do it, screw having a plan. Let's just charge for it and do it. Screw people's feelings. Your feelings are in the way of my accomplishment. However, the dominants also make really good leaders because they are going to get it done and they are going to make sure that the desired outcome, the result, is what was intended. And they don't, you know, tend to let people use excuses for not getting the work done. This works well in a sales environment where it's very much task and money oriented. A lot of sales professionals out there are very dominant in their personality because sales is a lot of rejection. Someone saying no, 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 and then yes. That type of personality bounces back from rejection really well. That's what I was when I was younger. There are pluses and minuses to it. So I was great at directing my little group of people. I had a vision. I literally was the director. That's the first thing under dominant, direct. But when it came to somebody else's project, because their results weren't aligned with my results, I poo pooed their results. So think about that as you go through, if you choose to take the disc profile somewhere, that there is no better communication style than another, and it can change. It can change over time, especially as you learn and grow as a person. It should change. Your personality doesn't change, but as we learn different skills, we intentionally show up in the world different. You and I are having digital conversation right now. You will inevitably change how you interact with the world. So, care to guess which one of these I am now as I've grown and learned? I am an even split between influence and steadiness, like dead even. So I am very outgoing and enthusiastic. Those are your influencers. These are the people that don't know what the word stranger means. To me, strangers are just friends. I don't know. And once I know you, we're friends. And tend to look at the bright side. Like what? No, the glass isn't half empty. Look, I'll pour more in. high spirited and lively. Like I'm like this all the time. My poor husband. I am always just so when I am down and not feeling good, at least one of the good things about that is being a high influencer is that when I don't feel good, it's very obvious. Like recovering from a surgery, I don't feel good all the time. So when I need to lay down, my husband it's very obvious. My husband's like, go lay down. Go stop doing what you're doing and go lay down. The cons of the influencer style, I mean, they're the life of the party, but they're also the life of the party. So influencers a lot of times can be so busy being a social butterfly that they don't capture close interpersonal relationships. Or they're very much cart before horse. Like, oh, we're doing a thing, let's go do it, woo! Don't confuse that with the directs and the dominance. That it feels similar, but there's a little bit there's a little bit of nuance there. With the dominance, the way that they achieve their goal is by telling everybody what to do. The influencers achieve their goals by cheering everybody on. They're focused on the whole. The dominants tend to more be focused on the whole so that the individual can get to their goal. Both are necessary. So when you look above the line, the D and the I, the dominants and the influencers, these tend to be your folks that are the leaders of the pack. They're the ones that stand out. I know that influence has such a connotation now with social media, but we're not talking about influencers. We're not talking about the job of influencer. We're talking about people who have the natural ability to make a path in any environment they're in. They do tend, however, because they are so people focused and so fun focused to get off track. Me, me, I can be so much enjoying having a good time that I forget that there's work to be done. I've had to work on that. Then look below the steady. Steady folks and the conscientious folks are treasures. Influence and dominance, they talk too much. The steadies and the conscientious, they watching. They are watching what's going on. Our steady folks are even tempered. I would 100% put my husband somewhere between steady and conscientious if I was teaching this class for him. But very even tempered, accommodating. These are your people pleasers, are your steadies. Like, how can we make everyone happy? Patient. Like, you know who the steadies are? Nurses, teachers. Yeah, 100%. Um, Very humble and tactful. Influencers and dominants don't tend to be tactful. They're going to say what matters, but they just go verbal vomit. The steadies tend to think before they speak so that the words that come from their mouth are appropriate to the situation. Now, where that can be a little bit of a drawback is steadies tend to be the people pleasers. They want everyone to be happy so much that they can put their own needs behind those of others, which they get a lot done for other people. They do. They're going to get it done. But then when they look around and look at their own world, it's in disarray. And then you've got your conscientious folks. I had a team member years ago who was definitely a conscientious, though not a big talker. Conscientious folks tend not to be the most chatty of people. Honestly, we might even call these our introverts. Somewhere between conscientiousness and steadiness is introversion. Analytical, reserved, precise. Their language is exact. And I would even think my husband more analytical and reserved, honestly. Private, not out there with the business. I'm the one on social media. I'm not dragging my husband on here. I mean, I would post pictures and stuff once in a while, but this is not his thing. This is my thing. Very systematic. He's an engineer. A lot of your behind the scenes people tend to be conscientious. So, data engineers, um, people who do customer service type jobs, people who are doing a lot of reporting and that kind of thing tend to be very conscientious because those kinds of roles tend to require people who can look at the details. That is such a strong skill to have. And they don't speak a lot, but when they do speak, you better listen because they paid attention to everything. What the conscientious have to watch out for, though, is one, not being able to make their voice heard because they speak so little that when they do speak, they have to speak up. to be heard, and then also not taking ownership of their successes, letting other people get the credit for the work that they did. Because they have a lot of behind the scenes type roles, then sometimes other people are taking credit. Make yourself heard. So why all of this? Now, remember, when we're talking about communication, these are styles, not personality types. Good, well rounded humans can float in between dominant, influential, steady, and conscientious. We all have a little bit. So, a good disc profile test will show you where you rank in all of them. My lowest is conscientiousness. So, influence and steady at this part of my life are in a dead heat, and it's dominance and conscientious way down there. But when I was younger, it was like dominant, and then the rest had nothing to do with me. But that's because I've learned and grown. So, what you now have to think is if all of us are leaning into certain communication strengths based on who we are and how we show up, but then there's also the moment we're in. So, being someone who splits between influence and steadiness, I flex between those two styles depending on what I'm doing. If I am leading a bunch of children in a Taekwondo class, influence is the way I'm going to be. I'm outgoing, enthusiastic, optimistic, very high spirited, and lively. I might put a pinky over into dominant because I have to be very firm when I'm teaching a martial arts class. They've got to listen to instruction, but I do want them to have a good time while I'm there. I want them to come to my class and enjoy coming to my class. You know, I can be very steady as well when people need that shoulder or that person who will listen to them. I tend to be that person because I don't internalize the tragedies of others. I can hear you, and if you want advice, I'll give it to you. If you just want to ear, I can be that as well for my friend group. But I'm patient with people. I have infinite patience for children. Not always adults, but adults that are childlike, infinite patience. Infinite. Um, Especially when I see people are struggling and learning and just need someone to not judge them. God blessed me to see that I don't always have to be right and tell people how to live their lives. You get real happy when you realize that. I'm gonna throw that one in there for free. But we've got groups of friends where people can be a little self-deprecating. We were at the game shop doing our work in progress Wednesday, and somebody walked in unprompted. Don't know why they said this, and so but somebody said, "Hey, how are you?" And this person goes, "Great. Now that the doctor put me on medication that makes me not want to take myself out." They said it differently than even behind the paywall. I want to make sure that I'm not too crass. And we all went, "But I'm an influencer and I'm steady." Well, darling, I'm so glad you're with us tonight. Show me the project that you're working. Lean into what I need. That person in that moment needed someone who was even tempered, accommodating, and patient. That was not the time for me to be Miss Cheerleader face, and I was tactful about it as well. So glad you're with us. Show us the project that you brought tonight. Changed the whole tone, and everybody went back to having fun. When you understand what you are first, that will then help you recognize where other people are. Now, don't go out trying to diagnose people with DISC. Please don't do that. You're not a doctor. I'm not a doctor. These are styles that have been studied over a few decades, and we all flex between them. Some of us just have some we are more high end than others. But I can recognize when somebody's being results oriented or very firm. But once I recognize that, I can start thinking about the why behind it. Why are they so strong willed about this project? Why are they coming across this way? Huh. Once I start caring about the person on the other side of that style, then I start caring about the messaging. Then I start considering how the message is being sent. Then I start considering what is the noise in between. And all of that happens in a millisecond when you intentionally invest. So find a disc profile site. There's so many of them. Get a free one. You don't have to pay for them. And see where you are. And see where it says you show up in communicating with others. Because that's what I love about the disc profile. Because it doesn't just say, here's how you show up in your communication, but here's how you connect with other people who might be the same as you. You get two dominants together, that's how the fight started. But you put the dominants and the influencers together, They will not shut up. They are just out there partying together. But you get your conscientious folks and your steadies together. They're just gonna look at each other. There is no style that's better than another. There's no style that's less than another. Different than doesn't mean better or worse than. It just means different. And you're different. That's unique to you. You must learn what you are, how you show up, how you show up with others to start learning how to better communicate. So that we don't have moments where we say and do things that are crass, that are insensitive, that are downright mean because we thought it was funny, because we thought it was okay, because that person's just too touchy. Point one finger, there's three more pointing right back at you. What can I do? Because remember, there's only one person on this planet that God gives you permission to control, and that is you. So how can I take the style that I am and learn how to flex my communication style? You do that through study and practice. You have to be intentional, which is why I'm doing this series. So this is a starting point. We can get back into our authentic self next time, and showing up as the best version of you. Because learning how to communicate in your style, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You still have to be you in the ways that you communicate. You don't want to show up as a phony. Who are you? You are who the world needs. But how do you show up as you the best way that you can? Go back and take a look at the first couple of videos I've posted. The next video, we'll get back into our book reading and textbook learning. But I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And definitely in the comments for the members' videos, leave me comments on other topics you would like to learn about that live in the communication sphere. I'm 100% open to suggestions. I'm also working on the greatest edit of my life to use to call out my members. I want to make it really Warhammer themed cool. That's something new for me. I'm working on it. Okay, fingers crossed. It's gonna be great. I think in my head it's gonna be great. All right, I'll see you in the next one.